I recently recorded a video to share with my family and friends, letting them know that I had started practicing polyamory. And I wanted to record it in a video because there was a lot of information that I wanted to give them. And I also wanted to give them the opportunity to absorb the information and process it before having to respond and not feel like they were being put on the spot if I called them and told them, or even texted them and told them. So now that I've shared it with my close friends and my family, I wanted to put it out there on YouTube in case there are other people who are also going through this process of, hey, I think I want to tell my friends or my family or some people in my life, and I'm not exactly sure how to go about it. I got so much love back on that video that I sent out, and I feel really proud of the script that I put together. So I'll stitch that video in at the end of this video so you can see the full 9-minute video that I had sent to my friends and family. Before we jump into that, I wanted to walk through the thought process that I had when I was putting this together. So if you feel like either putting together your own video to share with the people in your life, or if you're putting together a text message or a letter or an email or a conversation that you want to call and have with people, thinking about some of the points that you might want to touch on and maybe an order that you want to go through things in case that's helpful for other people. The first thing I would say is say it early and say it clearly. I mentioned polyamory within the first 30 seconds of my video, and I think it's important so you're not dragging it out and people aren't like, oh my gosh, what's this big thing that they're going to be talking about and, telling us and, kind of stressing or, coming up with ideas in their own head. Like, just get it out of the way early on, and then you can dive into, okay, what is polyamory, or what is ethical non-monogamy, and what does that mean for me specifically? Also, it's important to stay true to your own personality. So if you're someone who keeps things light and, jokes around, maybe have elements of that in there. Just stick with your own personality and don't try and make this someone else's style, because you're talking to your friends and family and you want it to come across naturally. The other important thing is to tell them why you're telling them. Hi, I've been practicing non-monogamy. This is why I wanted you to know. So that they're not like, why are you telling me this? Why do I need to know this? For myself, I knew I was going to start speaking more openly about this, so I told them that. And I said, no, I wanted to give you a heads up before I started doing that so you didn't feel like I didn't tell you ahead of time. The next important thing, and this is so important, is to speak with conviction. The more sure that you are and the less that you are sounding like you're questioning your decision or you're questioning how they're going to respond, if you're speaking in a way that you're assuming that they're going to be supportive, that you're assuming that people are going to accept this, that this is a normalized way to live your life, because it is, then it's going to make the person on the receiving end of that video more likely to be like, oh yeah, this is normal. This is fine. This isn't something that they're like, ooh, I'm embarrassed to tell you, because it's not embarrassing and you shouldn't be embarrassed of it. So if you're speaking with conviction and you're sure, then the people on the receiving end are going to feel that. So many of my friends who responded told me how much I was glowing, how happy I sounded, that they just loved seeing me so happy and so fulfilled and living true to myself. And so I'm just really happy that that came across. So I would just say, speak with conviction and don't be embarrassed about what you're telling people. The next thing that was really important for me was to explain some of the different types of non-monogamy and where I fell in that spectrum, because there are so many variations, and most people have had some sort of exposure through the media, through TV shows, through articles, things like that, where they've had some type of exposure to non-monogamy. And so they have ideas in their head of what it is. So for me, it was important to be like, hey, you've probably seen some of this in media or whatever. This is where I fall in the spectrum. You might have noticed my co-star, this is Mowgli. He's gonna join us now. Okay, another thing that might be helpful is to give examples that they can relate to. So even if they are not, someone who could relate to like polyamory, they can relate to having multiple kids and loving them all equally. Loving one of their children with their whole heart doesn't mean that they don't also love their other children with their whole heart. And that's a pretty easy concept for people to understand. The next thing I wanted to touch on was myths and misconceptions. So this kind of goes along with talking earlier about the different forms of polyamory or non-monogamy and where you fall in the spectrum. This is less about, you and more about misconceptions as a whole. And I think this is helpful because, again, people have these preconceived notions from things they've read in the media. And this is just a quick way for you to be like, hey, you might have heard this. This is not what it's about. And before I wrapped up, I wanted to touch on a couple of relationships that I have and times when I felt really loved and supported by those people. So for example, I had just had knee surgery and one of the people who I'm dating had come over and spent a day with me and worked from my house to take care of me. That's one of the examples where people are like, oh, well, are these people actually even going to be there for you if they're not your primary partner? But like, yes, they are. Yes, there's so much love and support that you're given and you have it from multiple people. So that's like even better. Your family and friends want to know that you're being loved and supported. Like, I think that's one of the things that a lot of times family members worry about with people who are practicing non-monogamy is like, oh, well, they're not serious relationships, or you're like not committing to someone, or they're not committing to you. And so then you're going to end up getting hurt and they're worried about you, not judging you, but they're worried about you. So ensuring them that you are loved and supported. And by giving examples of that, I think that's helpful. You're going to help quell some of those worries. And then finally, at the end, I just thanked them for being someone who I could trust with this information, thanked them for listening because it was 9 minutes long, and also opened the door for if they had any questions or wanted to talk to me about anything, letting them know that that was open and I'd be happy to answer any questions if they had them. That was how I structured my video. Obviously, you might want to restructure it and include some other information, or maybe not include some of the information that I included. Do it as a video, do it as a letter, however you want to do it. But I wanted to put this out there in case it was helpful for anyone else who is starting to think through this. So I'm going to continue putting out more content around polyamory. So next I'll be putting out a video on dating as a polyamorous person. A lot of people are familiar with the app Field, and then Hinge also recently released a non-monogamy option within their app. So I've been testing that out, and I will be kind of giving my thoughts and opinions on the different apps and the differences between them as a polyamorous person and what I've found. So if that's something that you're interested in, you can subscribe. Also, if you want to like this video and just show the algorithm that you like the content that is included, that would be super helpful. And I just really appreciate you guys being here and watching, and let me know in the comments if there's anything that you are wanting to see more content around, and I would love to put together a video on that. So thank you for being along, and I hope to see more of you on this journey. If I'm sending you this video, it's because you are someone who is really important in my life and who I want to share important things about my life with. So recently I started practicing polyamory, and I want to be able to speak openly and freely about that. But before I do so, I wanted to make sure I talked with my closest friends and family about it before I started talking about it publicly. I'm sending it in this weirdly formal video because of a few reasons. One, I wanted to take the chance to address some of the stigma and misconceptions around it ahead of time so people weren't forming an idea in their mind that was incorrect. Also answer some of the, most common questions, and give you all space to process and not feel like I'm putting you on the spot by FaceTiming you to tell you about it or something like that. Part of the reason that I want to be able to speak openly about it is because the more people I talk to about ethical non-monogamy and polyamory specifically, the more I realize it's a lot more common than people think. And there are a lot of people who are practicing ethical non-monogamy but not talking about it. And so I'm hoping that by more people talking about it, it will remove some of the stigma and that people will be able to come out and talk freely about it, and it will just become more normalized because it is normal and there's a lot of people who are practicing but just not talking about it. So that's one of the biggest reasons that I wanted to come out and just start talking about it. Also, I know that monogamy works for a lot of people, so this is not in any way trying to convince anyone that this lifestyle should be right for them. I'm just talking about why it's right for me. Moving on to what is polyamory and where does it fall under the non-monogamy spectrum? So there's this bigger umbrella of ethical non-monogamy where on one end there's things like swinging, which is very focused on sex. I'm sure there are areas of gray within there where there are ongoing emotional connections. That's not a community that I'm personally a part of, so I don't really know the ins and outs of that, but that's not typically considered the same as polyamory. So polyamory is sort of on the other end of the spectrum where it is focused on deep emotional connections, dating in the same way that you would date in a monogamous relationship, but just with multiple people. So there is a deep level of emotional intimacy and obviously physical intimacy with that as well, most of the time, not all the time. And then there's other things like open marriages, which can skew one way or the other depending on what level of emotional connection versus, oh, we're just able to have sex with people outside of our marriage. Depends on where, they fall in that spectrum. And for some reason, the media loves to talk about thruples. This is not something that's actually that common. There's nothing wrong with it. It just doesn't work out in practice as well, because having a triangle type of relationship and managing all of those interwoven relationships is complicated, and it just doesn't tend to work out as well. So they're pretty rare, but for some reason, whenever there's media about polyamory, they love to talk about thruples, and they make it seem like that is the most common thing, where it's really not. Again, nothing wrong with it, but it's just not that common. So getting deeper into polyamory specifically, polyamory is a form of consensual non-monogamy or ethical non-monogamy, which are used kind of interchangeably, where you are involved with multiple romantic partners at the same time. Sometimes you might only have one partner and still be polyamorous because you're open to connecting with other people. Your partner also likely has other partners as well. Everyone is fully aware, on board, and supportive. The idea is that we have this infinite amount of love to give, and that me loving more than one person doesn't take away from my love for my other partners. That in the same way that you love all of your children, and it's not like, oh, I love this child so much, so I love this one less. You have an infinite amount of love, and it's not comparing and taking away from your other relationship. And then within polyamory, there are a ton of different styles that you can work within. I'm not going to get into all of those because we would be here all day. But one of the main distinctions is hierarchical versus non-hierarchical polyamory. So in something like an open marriage, that would be typically a form of hierarchical polyamory, where there is a primary partner, your spouse in that case, and then you have secondary partners outside of that primary relationship. And in a hierarchical situation, almost always the primary partner's needs are put above the secondary partner's needs. On the other hand, non-hierarchical polyamory means that all relationships are equal and there's no ranking or prioritization of relationships. I personally practice non-hierarchical polyamory and specifically relationship anarchy, which means that all of my relationships are important and valued equally. I don't have or plan to have a main partner. And also this relationship anarchy extends beyond just romantic relationships and into friendships and family. And there's no ranking of, oh, well, this is my partner and my life partner, so their needs become the most important thing in my life. And then my friends or my family are deprioritized. And I'm not saying that every monogamous relationship is like that, but a lot of times that is the case and kind of the expectation that your partner comes first. And within relationship anarchy, it breaks down all of that. And I'm able to just approach friendships, relationships, family, all of these individually and not feel like any of them are at odds with each other. Okay, moving on to myths. There are a lot of misconceptions about polyamory, the first of which being that it is just about having sex with a bunch of people, which is just not true at all. It's very much about forming deep, emotional, loving connections with people. Sometimes those involve sex, sometimes they don't, just like in a normal, monogamous dating situation. Obviously, in the same way that monogamous relationships can get difficult or messy, the same can be said for polyamorous relationships. However, since there is this culture of transparency and honesty, I've found that they tend to resolve in a more respectful way that also retains friendships, which is pretty cool. There's also not this pressure to be the perfect match for anyone and to check all of their boxes or meet all of their expectations. And instead, you get to come as your fully authentic self and meet them as their fully authentic self and connect on the things that you connect on and not connect on the things that you don't, because they don't have to fulfill all of your needs. And you might have other partners who fulfill those needs, which is just a really cool thing. I have partners who are there to take care of me after surgery. I have partners who have helped me through breakups with other partners. I have partners who I'm planning things months into the future with. Like, these are real, true connections. And I feel incredibly loved and supported in them. I am approaching this lifestyle after years of introspection and self-work and realizing what I want in life and what I don't. And this is what I found works for me, and I'm very happy in that choice. So thank you for listening. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for being someone who I trust to talk to about this information. And of course, if there's anything that you want to talk about with me, and if you have any questions or anything, like, I'm open book, anything's fair game. Otherwise, I love you guys and thank you for just being in my life.